All right, we are recording. Hey, sorry about that technical difficulties. Look at these heavy hitters. How great to see you guys. I'm so stoked for you. So just right off the bat, I wanted to basically give a heads up and provide some support for the 2026 hikers. And I think you guys would be the cream of the crop to ask how it all went. I'm so stoked that you guys are all here to help us out. Um, I'm just going to start out with Alpianist just because he logged on first and have you guys just introduce yourselves and tell me which year you're in. I think I'm missing one other person, so he might join in a little bit. I'm looking for runner. So, Alpianist?
Yeah, so Alpianist is my trail name. I'm from Belgium. The trail name came about in, I think it was Big Bear, where I was playing some piano, and I had all the kits for the snow, and people called me the Alpinist. And then when they heard me playing the piano, then they were saying like, okay, let's combine these two, Alpianist. So that's that. So I hiked the PCT in 23, started really early around March 11th, I guess, and went into the Sierra May 1st.
Yeah, pretty early on 23 year. Kanga?
Hello, I'm Kanga. I'm class of 2024. Let's see, I got my trail name right around Wrightwood. And I started the trail March 22nd, and it was nowhere near in 2024 what 2023 was, for sure, but it was still relatively early. So started at the border at March 22nd and then entered the Sierra May 12th.
Wow, right on. And on my screen, I don't know how your guys are, but I'm gonna go down left with Hummingbird and Taiga.
Hi. Yeah. So we actually met hiking the Appalachian Trail, and that's for
22.
in 22, and I had gotten my trail name that year. We were a little bit later than Alpianist. In 23, we got to Kennedy Meadows South on you're
We
better at dates than I am.
Yeah, we started the trail April 5th and we entered the Sierra May 21st of 23.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, 23 was a monster year. That was 400 times the snowpack for that year. That was a crazy year for sure. And
Brutal.
Yeah.
wind?
Hey, yeah, so I started March 23rd this year. And then I entered this year around April 19th, 20th, and I entered with Ugly Stick, who's also joining us. And yeah, it was a very early entry. I think we were among the first two. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ugly stick.
Hey, I'm Ugly Stick, and like Win said, I started March 18th, and yes, I believe it was April 19th that we left Kennedy Meadow South and ventured into the snow and ice. It was rough.
What were y'all's most memorable moment? Like just from the very beginning where you have those butterflies at Kennedy Meadows South and you're basically going to like figure out what's the next step that you haven't done yet. So, what was the most memorable moments on each of your parts where it was like, oh wow, I'm doing it. I'm uh I'm actually taking the first steps into my next adventure. Anybody can chime up.
I mean, yeah, when I hiked the PCT last 2024 too, so I was kind of used to it, and I've done the JMT a few times too. So I knew I wanted to go into this year's early. Like a lot of people thought I was crazy, but it was my goal from the very beginning was to I wanted to experience the heavy snow and just see what it was like because I've done it in so many different seasons. Well, it became very real once I hit Kenny Meadows South and I saw like there was basically nobody there. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to enter this super heavy snowy Sierra. But fortunately, Ugly Stick showed up because I was kind of a little bit worried about entering by myself.
Yes, I agree. When you're getting those last 50 or 60 miles before you get to Continental South, you wonder how it's going to be alone. But once you get there and you meet somebody, like when and I hooked up, it takes a lot of weight off your shoulders knowing that you have somebody with you. Especially being from the East Coast, so I've never experienced any kind of snow like that. So my thought process was get there early as possible to try to utilize as many snow bridges as possible. And we were lucky; we had a lot of snow bridges. But unfortunately, the melt happened really really early, and lots of flooding, trail flooding, high river crossings. But yeah, my plan was to get there early, deal with the snow, and this way I can cross as many rivers and streams as possible to snow bridges. But it was rough. A lot of chest deep river crossings.
I think for us, I know I come from New Hampshire, so there's a lot of snow here, and I had a lot of winter experience going into the trail that year. But I think the snow out west is very different, and a lot of my apprehension just came from kind of like all the energy and buzz from like kind of everybody hiking around us, and there was a lot of inexperience and a lot of just the worry and people, kind of talking about what it was potentially going to be like and look like. And, I couldn't even imagine what 40 feet of snow was going to look like compared to even what I'm used to, and especially going into the spring. So there's some apprehension about that. And then just kind of when we did our, we swapped out a lot of gear at Kennedy Meadows South, and just like picking up my pack for the first time with all the extra food and the extra equipment that we had, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to carry this? Like, it just felt like I felt like I had trail legs until I put that pack on. And then I was like, oh no. So, and and then that first section too, I know people were bailing at, I think it was Lone Pine was the first stop, but the first place that we had gotten off was Kearsarge.
Yeah.
And just getting there and kind of like figuring out like, okay, what worked, what didn't, let's regroup, let's send some stuff home. We need to get more food. We need to cut weight somewhere else. So kind of just doing those switches were kind of the things that we figured out along the way. But, I think just having some snow experience going into it made me feel a little more comfortable with it. And then I guess the other thing I would say is that, we noticed there were so many people forming these huge groups in Kennedy Meadows South. And I think just from my experience, I think the bigger the groups get, the harder it can be to travel in places like that, because you have to adjust your pace for like the slowest person. When you have groups of like 10 people, it's really hard to get moving and make your miles and stuff. So I think we were fortunate that it was Tiga and myself and our friend Casper, who we'd met on the PCT, and we just kind of kept, a small group. We were able to kind of move the miles and get it done.
So. Yeah, and on that, it's like for me, the stress point, it wasn't. I was more stressed for other people watching these groups forming, and they're having like 2 meetings a day, and you have all these different mindsets going into it, and fears and everything else, and everyone's like, because our plan, like leaving KMS, like our date we left was based off our weather window to climb Whitney, right? Like we just, I don't know, we're very strong together, and we do better like when it's just the two of us, maybe one or two extras, because once you have all those other fears going into it, it stresses people out. So it's like we kind of always approach everything with, well, we'll see when we get there, right? Like we're gonna decide if we can do the thing or can't do the thing. So yeah, other than putting on those heavy packs, like picking it up the first time, being like, I don't know if my back can handle this. Like, that's when I was like, I guess we're doing this, and it's gonna suck, but we figured out quickly what gear we could drop and everything else, and we went for it, and and it's like, all right, day 3 we're climbing Whitney, and a couple days after that we'll be out of Kearsarge, and we just kept going. But I think it was very key that we kept a smaller group. 3, a couple times 4. We had a couple add-ons, a few places, but the smaller group, and just being able to be cohesive and not worry about all the fears of 20 people, and all that. So
And not to cut off anybody else because you're each very important to me. But I just wanted to let the viewers know that these guys, the roads were closed for their first resupply. So Horseshoe Meadows Road was closed for 2023 for a lot of the season. And so they couldn't get out at Horseshoe Meadows Road. They came out at Kearsarge Pass, which added. So hopefully later we'll talk also about the slow progress in the snow. So you added miles and made slow progress in the snow. So um, I'm sorry, Kanga, would you like to say what kind of surprised you at what?
You all are bringing me back to the buzz at Kennedy Meadows, man. The nerves are real, and when you're talking about like these giant groups that are meeting every day, and that's exactly what happened when I arrived on May 10th there as well. Um, I would also like to echo: enter with people that you know and trust. We entered with six, so I started the trail by myself, made friends along the way. We entered with six, and then in a very dramatic evening, two of them left in the middle of the night and didn't tell us. And so then we ended up with four. And four was a perfect number, I think, especially when you think about hitches later on in the later down in the trail. Not having six or 10, as you all saw, is really great because four can fit in a regular car with one driver. The weight of the pack took away a lot of the butterflies. I was very excited. And then when I weighed my pack and it was 40 pounds, I was like, with all the weight that I lost in the desert, I thought, I think I'm above the ratio that you're supposed to be. And then it really didn't feel like I had trail legs at all. And I think thinking about the pace on the snow, I'm glad that you brought that up, Jay, because I was very lucky that I hiked with some experienced people. One person had done the AT before, one person had already done the PCT. And so I was learning from them as much as possible. And from Kennedy Meadows and then we got off at Kearsarge, we packed 9 days worth of food, which was why my pack was so heavy. And I thought, there is absolutely no way it's going to take me 9 days to go 90 miles or, maybe 100 miles with the actual Kearsarge Pass. And in fact, it did. So I got stuck on one side of the river that I, as a 5'5" female, couldn't get across safely, and so I got had to camp on the other side of the river an extra night. So I'm very happy that I carried that extra food. But yeah, your progress as compared to the desert is going to be very slow on snow. And get ready to change your sleep schedule. Our group started waking up between 2 and 3, and then leaving between 3 and 4. Which, that's when we would make most of our miles, because then once the sun came up, it turned into mashed potatoes, and you can't move very quickly on that at all, especially with your heavy pack on your back. Still love the Sierra though.
And what do you call it when you wake up at 2 in the morning to start hiking?
What do I call it?
Or what, anyone can answer. Yeah, it's a Alpine Start, or I've also heard it as your Sierra Start for the PCT. But yeah, it's the only way to get going, or because and why is that? Why do you have to wake up at 2 in the morning to start hiking?
So yeah, it was the snow consolidation, and that was so for me, again, coming from the East Coast, and just that, I think the snow degrades differently out west too. And that was like a learning curve as well, of just figuring out how, like, when the best time to move was. And the snow consolidated beautifully. Like, you'd get up and you'd be hiking in the dark, but like the snow, you could cruise on it with just your micro spikes until, like Kenga said, like the sun would hit it, and by like 11 in the morning or so, it would start getting that soft, mushy. Then you'd start post-holing if you step too close to a rock or a tree, and then you'd end up in like Tiga had one that he dropped up to his armpits, and just dangling there. And, of course I stopped to take a picture. I was like, it's like slow going once that started happening. So that, Alpine Starts were key.
The term Sierra cement, right? So you do the Alpine Starts because it's not snow, it's like cement, right? Like that's what we heard a lot of people calling it, was Sierra cement. The
wet
snow.
Yeah, it has a wet cement consistency.
Yep.
So it's not hard cement, it's a wet cement consistency that's underneath you, and it's absolutely a bore to go through.
Yeah, I think
Alpinist?
um, when I started, also we had like this big group because when I arrived at Kennedy Meadows South, no one had gone on. Like everyone was waiting. Also, the weather wasn't really good at that time, so everyone was waiting and everyone was forming these big groups. And actually, I started with a big group as well, and we were the first group going in. But it's a big group. It's definitely not ideal, and they went off at Kearsarge, and then with a smaller group, we continued to Bishop. So we actually went from Kennedy Meadows South all the way to Bishop.
Bishop Pass.
Bishop Pass. The reason being, there was a bridge out over the South Fork of, I think it's the San Juan River,
Yes.
or I don't know. I
Yeah.
remember.
South Fork of the San
So
Juan.
we had to go out like at Bishop Pass. So it was quite a long stretch. I think it was 11 days of food, so it's a heavy carry as well. But like with the big group, we also started really early in the night, did the Alpine start as well. But after the big group left and we went on, like even if you started early, there was not a lot of frost anymore at some points, and then even during the early mornings, you could start post holing. So we gradually shifted our hike towards the day because we also wanted to enjoy the views. And if you're post holing anyways, then it's better with a good view, right? So so it started off like with the early starts, but after some time we just went with a regular day schedule. What we did try to do is do the passes like very early. So
Mhm.
just camp before the pass at the north side and try to do that first thing in the morning and then cross to the other side to the north facing slope. And then for the rest of the day, it's just a slog. It's slow, but it's beautiful.
Did anybody else have like a plan that they decided to do and then like had to change course and do other things while mid planning, mid itinerary?
Mm.
Probably not going in, but we had we were similar to Alpinist. We had gotten off at Bishop Pass as well, and at one point, like just by stroke of luck, we had been off trail in Bishop, and a huge storm had come through, and it was when like several of our people who we knew on trail who were um, a couple of days behind us, but in that section between Kearsarge and Bishop, and they were basically trapped in their tents for 18 hours with this storm coming in, and we got really lucky that we weren't out there because and actually we ended up taking 5 days off trail and renting a car and driving out to the coast for a few days just
Oh,
to
I
like
remember that.
we're not going in right now. So it ended up being some much needed 0 days, but the stories of people coming off the trail that have been stuck in their tents and kind of experiencing that, they were really shaken up, and it sounded like legitimately scary. They were running out of food and stuff, and I know one group who had actually called, hit the beacon on their spot, and search and rescue was like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, you're going to have to hike yourself out because we can't get in there. So, it's like you have to go in prepared, knowing like you got to bring enough food and just have a plan to get yourself out. That's kind of rule number one when you're going into the wilderness anyway. But, don't take that lightly. But I think we got really lucky that we weren't out there during that time, because I don't know how that would have affected my head if I would have had the
Mental fortitude.
mental fortitude to keep going if that had been me. So some of it's luck, some of it's stubbornness, I guess, but we got
I
lucky to get
guess the biggest change for me, it's a bit of a silly story, really. So after Bishop, a lot of the smaller group, they wanted to bail, so I basically continued alone, which was really, really nice. It's one of the most memorable experiences I can remember from the PCT. It's about 3 weeks alone in the Sierra, not really the high Sierra anymore, but still it's really nice. And so I've done all these passes, all the technical terrain, and everything went really well. And I was having a blast, and then I was going down in the around Dix Pass, I think in the, how is it called? The
Desolation Wilderness.
Desolation Wilderness, exactly. So it's at that point you're just cruising through mostly forested area, really, and nothing really dangerous anymore. But because of the snow melting so fast, like I think the week before there was like in 1 week, I think 100% of a regular snow year had melted off in just 1 week. So you started post holing a lot more, and in Desolation Wilderness, there were like a lot of trees down beneath the snow, and I didn't
Blowdowns.
see them. And that's the place where you often post hole, like just after or before a tree. And that's what happened when I was really jogging or almost running along the mountain, and I post holed, caught a tree, and then tumbled forward, and then I dislocated my shoulders. So
Oh,
that's a bit of an annoying thing. I couldn't get it in myself, so I had to have a heli rescue, which was really nice, to be really honest. Like I was flying with a heli above Lake Tahoe, very nice. And then Jay stepped in to help me along. So that's a bit of a change of plan. I skipped some kind of miles, like up to Donner Pass. I think Jay, you brought me all the way to Donner, and then I continued with like the arm in the sling, although the sling was gone like the next day, I think. Although the medic people, they said like you have to carry it for like 2 or 3 weeks, but no, that's not possible hiking, right? So that's a bit of a change of plan, but otherwise everything went quite smoothly. Yeah.
He took 1-0. He took 1-0 with a dislocated shoulder and kept on going. Well, I wanted to Ugly Stick. I want you in here because you actually have a little either video or photo of a blowdown that's kind of hidden. And I also wanted to show that or let people know that a lot of people skipped in 23 and went to Chester, but they were still under snow conditions. And that's what they were experiencing is these hidden blowdowns. And as a trail angel from the Quincy and Chester groups, we were very busy taking minor injuries off trail because they had twisted an ankle or hurt a shoulder or hurt an arm or a wrist from these blowdowns. So Ugly Stick, would you describe what you saw as far as these hidden blowdowns?
Well, you learn, like I'm from Pennsylvania, so like we don't post hole over here. So you learn from experience. So what happens is the rocks and these stumps, they hold heat. So it melts from the bottom up. And what happens is you can see the ground around it sink about a half an inch. So what happens with the wind picks up bark and dirt and it creates a ring. So you just look for that ring and it'll show you exactly where there's a stump, a blowdown, a rock. And when I say rock, these are boulders. These are the size of trucks.
Yeah.
And you fall. I think in my one video I showed where I was like 10 inches from the rock where the ring was, and I hit with my trekking pole and the whole thing collapsed. And I was literally 10 inches from that. And it was 7, 8 feet deep. Like you would have been down in a cave in a rock. And
Yeah.
if nobody's behind you, you're not getting out.
Yeah.
But you
So
learn. That's how you learn is by stepping in them. You're like, oh, I got to start looking for these more.
Yeah. Well, actually, when we were going down the Kearsarge Pass, that was like the worst of it by far. We post hole down to our hips basically, and the only reason we didn't fall all the way through is because our packs. Our packs would stop us from sinking deep because we could look down the hole and we could see it goes down for like 20 feet.
Yeah.
We immediately got snowshoes after that.
right on. I was going to ask you because a lot of people in 23 didn't use snowshoes. They felt like the snowshoes did not help because there was such a short window of snowshoes. So where did you use your snowshoes at and when?
We
So
so we initially started without snowshoes from Kenny Meadows South because I didn't know what the conditions would be like. Um, I know that when the snow is powdery and fresh, you want snowshoes, but when it starts to get sun cupped, like in late May and June, then snowshoes aren't that useful. The more consolidated it gets, the less snowshoes are helpful. But basically, once we got past Forster Pass, the post holing was just so bad that we knew we needed snowshoes. There was no way we were going to get to our resupply before we ran out of food. I was so optimistic at start because I actually thought I was planning to go all the way from Kenny Meadows south to Mammoth Lakes as our first resupply, like just that huge distance. And then when we got to Forster and we're at the top of it, we were talking and we were like, "There's no way we're going to be able to make it that distance. Like we're almost already out of food, and we're going to have to go to Kearsarge, but for sure." So when we got
that was our plan. We're going to go all the way to Mammoth.
Yeah, I actually did do that because I did a yo-yo this year, last year. So when I went southbound, I actually did go from Mammoth to Kenny Meadows South, and I almost ran out of food. So, and that's with no snow. So that would have been hard for us with snow.
Wow.
Kanga, one of the things I wanted to ask was for pretend I'm 5 foot, I forgot what you said, but 5'4", and I am a woman and I started this solo and I'm now going into the Sierra kind of going, what do I do now? How do I approach this problem?
One of my goals in the desert was to find people that I was able to get to know and then plan to go in the Sierra with. Now, it just so happened that I met a 6'3" man named Bobcat who he had already done the PCT on day 3, and we hiked the entire desert together and went to Sierra. So I would say one thing, when you are planning, if you are a shorter female, and again, I'm 5'5", I'm very average. And so there are much shorter people who do this. But try to have at least one taller person in the group. And I say that because when I mentioned that river that we got stuck on the other side and needed to wait until morning so that there wasn't as much snow melt happening and the river level dropped, he attempted to get across and he was struggling. And, he was significantly tall, 10 inches taller than I was. And so he was the one that said, we're not going to try this because I'm struggling. I can't even make it halfway across. So we're not going to try it with you. So I would say when you're thinking about planning on going in the Sierra and finding people, try to have at least one taller person. And again, I was the shortest in my group. So I had someone that was 6'3", and then 5'9", 5'9", and then I was 5'5". So there was one scenario in which it was a full swim. It was a very slow moving river, but it was a full swim. It was much over my head. And luckily we were able to inflate the sleeping pad, and then taller people ferried our backpacks across the river because they were able to touch, where thankfully they ferried my pack across, and then I just had to focus on swimming and not touching at all. But I think if you are going to it solo as a shorter person, trying to find maybe at least one taller person to enter with would be a wise choice.
Yeah, and I kind of speaking to that, I would say when we were hiking in 23, there was so much snow that we just spent our time, and I would say, it all depends on when you go in, but we would just spend our time like looking for snow bridges to cross, and almost every single time we were able to find a snow bridge or a tree and just go across it. Like so I think in some ways the crazy amount of snow was like advantageous that we were able to I never had to swim across a river like Kanga did.
Yeah, the first half of the Sierra was Snowbridge Central, and then there was a heat wave, and then it all melted. And so I really feel like my Sierra experience was snow in the first part, and then it was fighting said snow melt the second half of it. Yeah, so I didn't have to cross any crazy rivers until really the last 10 days that I was in, because the snow really started to melt suddenly.
Yeah, Ugly Stick and I had similar, where we had a lot of snow bridges early on, and we still had snow bridges later on too, but they got more sketchier. Like we weren't sure we were going to make it across before they broke. And then as far as the crossings go in general for us, at least the water levels weren't too high. because it was still pretty early on. Um, and at least until maybe north of Yosemite, then it got a little bit heavier.
And Alpinist, did you have a snowbridge story?
Yeah, like I think the same as everyone. When you have a really big snow year, I think it's advantageous to either go really early or wait it out. But there is some time in the middle that is really treacherous, I guess. So I was really lucky that most of the early stage, I think a bit the same as Kanga, was a lot of snow bridges, but it's quite scary because sometimes you cross these snow bridges and you can see like some holes in the snow or some other areas where there aren't snow bridges, and it's really rushing. And if you would fall in, then you could be swept under the snow. And so that was kind of scary. So at some point, it's just not really advisable to trust a very small or thin snow bridge. So always check with your poles, and if you are crossing a really sketchy one, maybe like I remember one time we did a snow crossing or a river crossing with a group over a snow bridge, and then I had a small amount of paracord, and we did it one by one, never in the entire group, of course, and one by one, and we had the guy on the paracord, and then to make sure if someone would fall in, then at least they are not being swept away. Although I'm not really sure if we would be able to pull someone out of a rushing creek. But definitely when I was continuing alone, it was one of my main concerns. Like I'm quite all right in the alpine terrain, but the rushing creeks, that's a scary thought, really.
Mm-hmm. One of the creeks we had, it was raging and there was no snow bridge, and we found one tree that was at this awful angle that like fell into another tree, and we're like, well, we could get across that, but doing it with packs on is not safe, right? I mean, it was a small tree, branches breaking. So I pulled out my bear line, and I'd already told her like this plan before we entered the Sierra, and so I went across with my bear bag line, and then I threw it back across to her. She threw it up in a tree, right? And then she held on to it, and we had a couple carabiners. So what would happen is she's holding it, around a tree branch up high. I'd give slack. Casper would clip a pack onto the line with a carabiner, and then I had my bear line like wrapped around a stick. So I'd pull it tight, and then she would zip line them across, right? And that's how we got the packs across, right? So we didn't have to cross this log, because on the other end of it was literally like 10 feet off the ground. So then you had to like shimmy down another tree, right? So you have snow bridges, you got trees, and then, like having a paracord, right? So you can rope in, if the snow bridge might break, like there's all these thoughts that you need to think through on how do I make this easier and safer right now than like, why risk something that you don't have to risk, right? Like try to do things smart, like if you could zip line your bags across, like that's great,
Exactly. And I think like especially if there is a lot of snow, you're not following the red line. So I
Right.
think everyone was
What
just
red line?
walking the safest place.
Yeah.
And for river crossings, that's very often just going a bit upstream.
Yes.
And that's when I was alone. I did that quite often. Like when I came to a certain crossing and it didn't feel really safe, then I just went upstream, and almost always you can find a decent spot which is really okay to cross. And so yes, it is a bit challenging, but there are always ways to get across, and never like do something that you're not sure about. I would say just rethink things and find a different spot or a different way, and you'll get across. And
Yes.
if not, like if when you're early, you're kind of alone, but if you're little bit later, then there are always some other people. Just maybe wait for some others and try to cross together or something like that. But
So without talking about my personal adventures, I wanted to have like a wind or ugly stick talk to like what I'm pretty sure that you guys have felt the same thing I have felt, where I call them spidey senses. Your spidey senses are like, nope, something's something's not right about this, and I need to stay left or need to stay right, or I need to pull back, or I need to take some time and rethink this. And one of the crazier times that I remember um, doing this on my experience was I was on a ridge line, I was on a crest, and I didn't know how far over I could go before I was on a wind. Before I was on a lip of a that was caused by wind, and therefore there was nothing that was going to hold me up, and I was just going to fall off the side of the cliff there. So I just remember having that sense of, oh, I'm way too far towards the cliff edge, even though there was still a ton of snow. I could just feel that I was close. So uh, when do those things happen to you, and when do you trust your instincts to like, okay, I gotta just take a step back here.
I think we probably both agree. The first was on Forester Pass. The snow there at the chute. For us, it was completely solid. There was no way to make like heel snow steps. You had to use some kind of implement. Uh, I actually did not have an ice axe. Ugly Stick did have an ice axe. So he was ahead of me making chops with his ice axe very slowly. I probably took us like 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get across.
Oh, yeah.
Just taking our time. I was behind him digging the steps deeper with my trekking pole. I didn't have as good snow spikes that he did. Something I corrected later on, but just taking our time and not rushing through that spot. Usually, like later in the year, it's not that bad because it's pretty deep footsteps from other hikers, so you kind of just you still go carefully, but this time you really had to be cautious at that particular spot, just because otherwise we'd slip. And there was enough snow that, I mean, you probably would be injured. I don't know if you would die, but later in the year, it's all rocks, so you would probably be severely injured. But like if you, at the time we went across, if you slipped down the chute, you might survive, but broken bones, not
Very, very
something to look
fast
forward
sleigh
to. But
ride. That's what it'd be.
yeah. Um,
Say that again, Ugly Stick. We didn't hear,
If
or I
you
didn't hear.
slipped on the chute when we were there, there was no visible rocks. You were going 100 miles an hour and just hope that you survived at the bottom.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
I would.
another time was up on that one ridge line. I really wished I knew the and Wynn had fallen back in Mammoth because he messed up his leg. So I went ahead without him, which was very dumb. And I would never suggest that being that early. And the wind almost blew me off this ridge. So I actually had to walk back down the valley, and I put probably an additional 7 or 8 miles and just completely deleted that whole section. And just it was just too dangerous, especially being alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I try to make a post on Far Out every chance that I could to let people, give them advice. Just follow my boot tracks down the valley and just skip
Nice.
that whole section because you're not going to survive it. I mean, the wind was
Nice.
blowing so bad I was laying on my chest.
Yeah.
I shimmied back down just to get out of the wind where I can actually get up and crawl and then start walking and I got off of that ridge line so fast. I
Nice.
actually, it was a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky, and I was actually going to have to take a 0 day to let that windstorm. And I was like, no, this is too dangerous. But yeah, you just have to make common sense, smart decisions out there. Safety has to be your number one,
Yeah,
especially being.
there were a lot of instances where it was kind of hindsight 2020, where we were in a sketchy situation, and it's like, well, we probably should have done something different, but at this point, we just have to get through this. We did so many like sketchy traverses where we didn't follow the red line, and we went down like a creek that was frozen, or just a lot of weird things. And even when I got through all the Sierras, even in Oregon, Washington, Oregon, there was one around Mount Thielsen that was just ridiculous. I was like, I thought I was done with this because Oregon had so much snow. And I just remember going all the way up Mount Thielsen trying to avoid these switchbacks, that were just horrible. And I didn't have spikes on me at the time because I thought I was done with
Yeah.
spikes. This was in July.
Yeah.
I don't know, this was late June actually, but yeah, I scrambled all the way up kind of Mount Thielsen-ish, and then I went down the other side. It was all just rocks and scrambles, and I'm holding on to like the trees, slowly trying to get back down the trail. And the whole thing was maybe like 2 miles or a mile and a half. but it took me like 3 hours just to go through this little section. And yeah, a lot of, like I said, just things where you think, well, I definitely shouldn't have done it this way, and thought a little bit. A lot of times it's hard because you're looking at your map and you're looking at the contour lines. You can't tell that there's like a huge cliff face or something on the other side, and so you get there and you're like, oh, there's a cliff there now. What am I going to do? So it's a little tricky at times. You really got to think about the geography.
I guess one last thing about listening to your spidey senses or a scenario. Um, if you're afraid of snow and you know that you're not going to really enjoy it and you're not feeling like you want that challenge, there's no shame in flipping. So you also need to trust your gut. And obviously in 2023, even NorCal was covered in snow. And I know in 24, some people that I knew in the desert flipped up and then ran into snow because that year Northern California got a lot of snow as well. But if your gut's telling you that you need to flip, just flip.
Yeah. I am I enjoy the idea of a through hike, but I would definitely go Sobo with no snow. I would join Wind Snow Sobo with no snow whatsoever in the Sierra.
Yeah, there was no snow in the Sierras, but I did hit a late storm on Baden Powell, which was interesting in October. So you can still get snow and like Ascento and Baden Powell, but
Oh yeah.
it
Uh,
is
I
it
th
is nice going through this year without snow.
I think that's a thing I wanted to mention. Like we are now focusing on the Sierra, but to be really honest, the sketchier stuff I had in the desert
Yeah.
and in North Cal,
Mm.
because the Sierra is like you go up this big pass and then you go down and it's quite mellow, I would say. But in the desert section and in North Cal, there is like very steep terrain, and the PCT just goes along this steep cliff side, and when there is snow, it's just one big sheet of ice and snow. And I would say sometimes it was a bit sketchier, purely technical, I would say, sketchier in the desert, because in 23 there was a lot of snow in the desert.
Yes.
I remember doing not only San Jacinto but Baden Powell and the entire San Bernardino range, and also in North Cal there was a lot of snow. So it's definitely not only the Sierra, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to mention that there can be snow basically on any part of the trail from Mexico all the way to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I did want to do, and I guess it's a good intermission time for this, is what I did want to impart to anyone listening to this is we have a group of experts here, but we all gained experience doing it. And what I wanted to impart from you is that those of you that are going to be on this year, 26, you're going to make really good decisions all the way up until these decision points. So I know Wind said something like, yeah, hindsight 2020, I would have done that. But all of the good decision making skills that all of these guys have done up until that point allowed them to make an error and or have a decision that in hindsight um, probably wasn't the best move, but in other words, they were prepared to make the not best move because of all the other good decisions they made that way. So what I'm trying to impart is if you take all of these guys' experiences and what they're trying to tell you and listen to their problem solving skills up until the point where they get to um, that crux move where it's like, all right, what have I learned about myself and my adventure skills have brought me to this spot where I can now make an informed decision about my next few steps. And so that's kind of my goal of this also is those little challenge moments in your adventure. One of the things that I remember in adventuring is just like, this is not what I expected. I just had multiple moments of just going like, I had a totally different, like 180-degree view of how this was going to work out. And there were many, many moments in all of my adventures where it was like, well, I totally guessed that one wrong. I'm glad I survived that. And if you guys have any of those moments while you were doing the PCT, this would be a good time to throw those in.
Uh, should I do some mudslide?
Oh, yeah, you should.
Yeah. So, yeah, hummingbird almost killed me after I almost killed myself coming off of Kearsarge Pass. Um, that it ended up being because of the road walk all the way down to the bottom. It was like a 26-mile day for us to get out, right? So we're coming off of Kearsarge up over it at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I think.
Late afternoon.
Right.
Yeah.
It was late afternoon, sun had been on it. And when you come up over the trail actually kind of wraps down around the right side of a big bowl. And I was like so done with the snow at this point, right? Like it's already a long day. And I come up along the edge and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna butt slide this, right? However, I wasn't quite thinking right. And it's like, hey, it's like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And this really steep spot right here, this bubble of snow I'm sitting on has been in the sun, getting really soft. And so I sat down, right? Like my legs are dangling. It's steep, right? And I sit down, and as I collapsed my trekking poles, right, getting ready to butt slide, it just gave way, right? It was avalanche. Technically, it's a wet slide. And I mean, it gave away, and I immediately had the instinct to churn and jam my poles into the ice wall that I just created, and was able to kind of slow myself and hold on while the avalanche went below me before I finally broke loose. And then I'm riding on top, I'm like 6 feet above everything else on this pile of snow, right? Riding an avalanche, like it was probably 300 yards down.
Pretty far.
It was a long, I mean, I took a video at the bottom, right? Like, wow, I just rode my first avalanche, and you could see my hands visibly shaking, right? And yeah, I mean, it scared the Jesus out of me. And then Hummingbird finally made her way down, and
I walked.
She took where the trail where the red line probably is, and she got down there and she just looked at me and she was like, "You knew better than that," She was so mad at me for doing it, but it was like I knew better than shouldn't be doing that like this time of the afternoon on this kind of slope angle and everything. It was just don't recommend doing that. Yeah, like think about how snow melts and if you can cause an avalanche in June. Yeah.
Now's a good time to chime in.
Yeah.
Anyone else do anything dumb?
No, we just want you to sit with that for a little while longer.
Yeah, I still am. Yeah, it was a wild ride.
For
One
me,
time.
For me, it was the river crossings, like north of Mammoth. I believe south of Mammoth, we were good with the snow bridges. And again, at this point, I was alone. I was the first one in there, and so I've never experienced river crossings like that, especially being from Pennsylvania. And with the melt at this point, it's like May 1st or maybe like the last weekend of April, and it was just melting so bad. And I believe on one of my videos, I crossed like 7 streams before the afternoon even hit. And I really wish I remember the river it was. And it wasn't very rapidy. Like when you look at it, you see the white rapids, you're like, oh, that's crazy. This was a nice calm stream. And I'm like, this is going to be an easy one. But it was very wide. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go up a little bit. And that stream took me. I'm talking almost 400 meters. Luckily, I had my paracord, and on those streams being alone, I wrap it around my waist, and I'd unhook my sternum strap and my hip belt, and I tied that to my pack. On that time, I had to dump my pack, and I hurry up. There was saplings. I grab a hold of saplings. I pull myself up, and I braced myself before the stream, and my pack got a hold, and it yanked me, and then I pulled myself out. Now I grabbed the rope, pulled my pack up, and then I just sat there, and I remember going, I had enough of these river crossings. I just need a shot of whiskey and be in a warm bed right now. Just again, though, it's common sense. Though you have to think about stuff like that. But just have to, and that's I wasn't experienced. I just thought it was like, what can happen to me here? And like I said, I didn't want to lose my pack. I think I was still like 4 days, maybe 3 days out from Sonora Pass, all alone, nobody out there. I'm like, I don't want to lose my pack. Without my pack, I'm nothing out here in 7 feet of snow. So yeah, and I made sure I let Win know. I was like, man, hit those streams very early. For those people out there watching, you want to hit the streams early, 6, 7 a.m. Because if you wait till 2 in the afternoon, I could not believe how much they would swell within 10, 11 hours.
Yeah.
Just from the water runoff. It was insane how much it went up from 7 a.m. to 3 in the afternoon. It was insane. So hit the water crossings as early as possible. Try to plan it out. If it's sketchy and you get to it and it's like 2:30 in the afternoon, set up camp, hit that thing 5 a.m. I promise you it'll be a lot easier. Even though it's dark and it's scary, it'll be a lot safer.
And
Just
the other added advantage of hitting water early in the morning is you have the rest of the evening or daytime and afternoon to get your clothes dry, or at least get them from drip dry a little bit. So there is an advantage to that. The only other thing that most people need to mitigate is, especially if it's a log crossing or something to that effect, where you're on top of something that could be icy or slippery. So that you might want to do later on to let that ice or frost melt some. But yeah, definitely hit early in the morning.
Yeah. Regarding those log crossings, definitely don't try to cross when they're wet. Like if you can see the water splashing on the log, it's almost always a bad idea to try to cross logs like that because how slippery they are, unless you happen to have really, really good traction. There's a few crossings in Washington that are like that, where I want to say one in Glacier Peak Wilderness, where there's this log that's just very easy. Like there's a few log crossings that's in like kind of this washout area, and it's just very easy to slip on that log because of all the water that's coming over it. Um, but I was going to mention I didn't have too many problems in the Sierras crossings, but in 2024, Bear Creek was a big one for me. And even though I tried to cross at like 4 a.m. because I thought the water would be lower, this was maybe I'm thinking, trying to think what time of year this was, like around June 3rd, maybe June 4th. And the water was just, it was like the scariest crossing I've ever done because it was so powerful. And initially I tried to cross it right where the trail met. And I got into it a few steps and I realized this was like a horrible idea. Like it was just way too heavy. So I backed out and then went downstream somewhere where the river forked a little bit more. Like you want to cross where it's wider because, it's going to be less turbulent. And even then, it was still like really, really heavy water. But I got across, and I mean, my feet were just completely frozen. And I guess that's one of the downsides of crossing early in the morning is there's no sun to warm you up. So I was basically like a bit worried about getting like frostbite or something because I couldn't feel my feet. So I was basically jogging to warm up. And I jogged, and just as I started to get the feeling to my feet, I got to the next crossing, which was the same thing. And so my feet got cold again, and then I crossed that, and then I jogged some more to warm up. But it's like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. But yeah, like you got to take those crossings. Don't just cross where the trail meets the water. Go down and up. If you feel uncomfortable once you start entering it, back out if you can. Like, don't just commit to it.
Yeah.
I think,
and with that said, like, look, sorry. I was gonna say with the crossings, like I really, in LPNS, it might have been like your comments because obviously we're like a week behind you. But I was like studying the far out comments of those ahead of me and in years past, like what did they do for this upcoming water crossing? And it's like, oh, someone found a log a quarter mile upstream, right? So since we weren't even on the red line, I would look at where it's at on far out, and I'd contour us, just stay high. Yep. And come around, and it's like, all right, this should be about a quarter mile upstream. And we'd look, we're like, all right, cool. Because I think it was Bear Creek actually has like 3 forks, like within a quarter mile above it, right? So we stayed high and we crossed each fork separately. and then worked like the half mile back down to where the red line would be, and completely circumvented Bear Creek because of that. But like studying the far out comments from years past, like proved really helpful.
And also there is like an entire document from Andrew Skirka, who
Mhm.
has like all these screenshots of these different crossings and where he recommends to cross. So that's something I looked into when I was about to enter the Sierra. So in Kennedy Meadows South, I looked into all these different crossings and where to cross. Like indeed, like you said, Bear Creek or some other crossings, you have these different forks, and the forks before they combine into one big raging river, it's like a lot easier to cross them separately.
Yeah.
So one thing I would like to add, and so you say we talked about spidey senses, we talked about being prepared, and but I would also say, as an advice, don't listen too much to comments or to things you read online. It's definitely very helpful, but also conditions change very, very rapidly. Like something several days ago can be totally gone when you are going through. And I would say just know like what your capabilities are, what your skills are, know like which kind of gear do I have, and can I use my gear, and then just have a look yourself. Like don't be scared in advance. Like you can read all these crazy comments, or maybe people watching this can be like, oh, what kind of crazy stuff did they all encounter? But just go and have a look for yourself, and maybe it's totally fine. And of course, be prepared to turn around if it's not, like if it's really dangerous or you don't feel like it. Even if other people did it before you, if you are not feeling comfortable with, be ready to turn back. But definitely always have a look for yourself and see if it's something that you would do, and not like stay in your tent and look at all the comments and become really scared and just don't go and have a look, because a lot of times it's just fine. It's all about knowing what your skills are and if you are prepared to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because based off of now wind, you saying 24 first week in June, Bear Creek was a problem. I didn't even know I crossed Bear Creek. It was so much not a problem.
Exactly.
And I had gone in a week before you. Like we had gotten over it and I just thought it was, you know, another creek crossing. And then at our lunch spot, we're like, oh, Bear Creek's already done. Like I didn't even think anything of it because we had hit it at 8 a.m. and it wasn't anything big. So yes, I'm glad that you said that. Take it, I think reading all the comments and hearing people's experiences, let's say they're 1 week, 2 week, 3 week in front of you is really great. And I think it's good recon for you. But again, you have to trust what's in the moment and conditions do change quite quickly.
Yep.
Any other decision points or points that kind of surprised you?
Not so much snow, well, maybe snowing, but don't underestimate how cold it can get in certain weather conditions, especially rain. Like it might be 40 degrees outside and dry, and it's fine, but once it starts raining, it's amazing how quickly your body cools down. I had multiple situations, um, mostly in Washington, but one in Southern California going southbound actually, but where it rained, it was like 40 degrees outside, and it was like actually my coldest day last year was going from hiker town to Agua Dulce. It was this crazy rainstorm that dropped a bunch of snow. This was maybe like mid-October, um, and the rain, it just was so cold. And it's just the worst is when your hands, if you don't have proper hand wear, your hands get really cold, you lose dexterity, and you're trying to like do things and you can't because your hands are so stiff. And like you're maybe trying to put layers on, and it can cause kind of almost like a panic attack in a way because you're like, oh, this is a really bad hyperthermic situation, but I can barely react. So just don't underestimate when it starts raining, and it's really even like I said, if it's 40 degrees but it's not raining, and then it is raining, it's just kind of amazing how cold it can get. So you kind of prepare ahead of time. You look at the weather and see how bad it's going to get. Maybe put layers on ahead of time, and especially some kind of like wool covering or gloves, basically for your hands. And what I found, especially with gloves, is not to allow them to get wet, because once you have wet gloves, then they're almost kind of useless. So whatever is making contact with your skin, try to keep it dry as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been so cold at times I couldn't get into my tent. I had to get my partner to open up the tent because I couldn't hold on to the zipper. I couldn't feel the zipper. I couldn't get into my sleeping bag because I couldn't zip up my sleeping bag. I was so cold. So you gotta
Yeah.
think about those things ahead of time and not let your hands get way too cold where you can't take care of yourself anymore. Your
Yeah. And
brain's functioning fine. It's like I just can't hold on to the zipper.
yeah. And talking about cold things, like the one of the worst parts of the daily ritual for me was putting my feet in frozen boots every morning. There's like you'd get out, you're like in your sleeping bag, and you're like, oh, I'm actually warm, and you're getting out in the dark, and like the boots wouldn't even move; they were so frozen, and you're just like slamming your feet into them. Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, that's another suggestion I would have is always make sure you have a dry pair of socks at night, because your
Yes.
feet will get, like, especially in this series, your feet are just wet day after day, and you can get trench foot or other worse conditions. And you just want to let your feet dry off at the end of the day so that they don't get any bad conditions. I mean, you can even get, what is it called?
Trench foot.
It's almost like trench foot, or even
Gangrene.
I just saw this on, I don't know if anyone watches the Pit TV show, but it's basically like a bacterial infection that you can get from open wounds, and then it can spread, and it can happen from cuts and things like that. So
Yeah.
um, you just
Necrotizing
got to,
fasciitis,
yeah, something
What
like
has
that. But
cellulitis or something? Yeah.
cellulitis.
so I always, yeah, cellulitis, but I always kept like a dry sock on me at the end of the day, just so my feet could fully dry out. Because at the end of the day, they looked horrible, but by the morning they looked good. So at least I could reset every day and not have trench foot or anything.
Actually, I slept without socks. Like it might seem cold, but that's even better to dry out your feet during the night. Because even with like dry socks, they are still not ventilating properly, and without socks, that really helped drying them out. But of course, it's different for everyone. So
Yeah, for me, I think it was. I'm. It's probably just a clean thing for me because I didn't want to get my sleeping bag wet, or my feet were just so disgusting and smelly that I wanted like a barrier between my sleeping bag and my feet.
Like
I
this
have
sleeping
a
bag
wool.
is too expensive for these dirty feet.
It does, I guess, depend on the sock. I had like dark tough wool socks, so they're a little bit more. If I had maybe polyester socks, it might be different.
But I also recommend to dry out your hiking socks. I would, somebody in my trail family showed me this, but it was giant safety pins, like 3-inch safety pins. And so I would hook and safety pin a pair of socks from the day prior onto my pack, and that would dry in the sun. So then every day I started with fresh, dry hiking socks, assuming there was not like a rainstorm midday.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I think they're called nappy pins, like for diapers, and I would just have them on the back of my pack and dry anything I needed during the day.
if you don't have a dry day, like if it's raining and you can't really put them on the back of your pack, you can either put them on your shoulders, like beneath your shoulder straps, or in your underpants. And like during the night, you can stuff them in your underwear, and that dries them out as well.
Yeah.
It's maybe a bit disgusting, but okay, it works.
Yeah.
As you mentioned about taking your socks off to air out, there was, I believe it was the night before Forester Pass. Like Wynd and we slept with every piece of clothing that we could find just to stay warm. We were looking for 5 pairs of socks just to sleep. It was so cold.
Yeah.
I remember getting out of my tent.
I actually had.
It looked like a mummy there, just wrapped up. We had like 3 hats on.
It's funny because I had so many more layers than you did. I know you had like significantly fewer layers than I did because, yeah, in the morning I'd have every layer on possible. I was sleeping with like 5 layers, and then I'd have to take them off in the morning, which was always kind of a chore because it would warm up so quickly from hiking. But then, you generally go ahead of me because you didn't have that many. I'd often remark like all you had is maybe like a a fleece on and like your base layer or
Yeah.
something. I was like, how are you not cold?
The only reason I started hiking with pants on is from post holing. My shins were completely destroyed. So I'm like, oh, I guess I have to buy a pair of pants. Because when you post hole as you're going forward, and now all of that frozen snow just digs into your shins and your knees, and you're bleeding. Like I look like I was just shot deer getting like a blood trail through the woods. I'm like,
We're not
oh no.
advertising this very well, guys.
Yeah. I'm
We
actually
wore alpine gaiters. It was kind of
Yeah.
funny, like as the day would warm up in this year, right? We're wearing our alpine gaiters, right? Keep the snow out and from post holing and that, but we're both wearing like short booty shorts, you know. So like there was coming out of it was actually right after we met you, Jay, like going into desolation, like the sun was so bright, I actually burnt the back of my knees, you know,
Oh,
just
no.
this burn line from the alpine gaiters to the booty shorts, you know, but I don't know. The alpine gators were a win.
And just talking about gear, can I like make talking about gear? The biggest thing that I learned going into the snow in this year was just because the sun gets so bright and intense, and I had completely underestimated the snow glare coming up. And I like that first section between KMS and like the first place where we dropped out at Kearsarge, I had, it was like the sunburn under my chin, the inside of my nostrils, my tongue was actually burnt, and like the roof of my mouth from like mouth breathing going up the passes. So, one of the things that when we were regrouping with our gear, I stopped in town when we were in Bishop, and I got a buff for the lower part of my face. I had to switch out to glacier glasses, like just, actually I did ghetto ones. I put duct tape on the side of my sunglasses just to improvise, but it was like, just accounting for the sun and how bright it was and making sure you have good sunscreen and just protecting your skin, because that, the snow blindness is real. The glare is real. And that was just kind of one of another thing that, I had underestimated how intense the sun was going to be out there. So
You can be cold and sunburnt simultaneously.
It's crazy.
I mean, it was so bright in some spots. I was wearing my glacier glasses inside my tent.
Yes.
It was still so bright.
Yeah. We're both sitting there eating dinner, and like we pre-make our dinners and dehydrated meals, and we're both sitting there, we're like, why is this so spicy?
Yeah.
And then it took us a minute to realize it was because we had sunburnt our tongues. I was like, we need to stop talking.
That's the first for me. I've never sunburned my tongue.
Yeah. Burned our tongues.
Crazy. Well, one of my bigger mistakes was finding out that frozen lakes were much warmer than stream crossings. And so you get used to jumping in the Sierra Lakes, and you're like, oh, I can do the stream crossings because I'm so used to cold water. But yeah, those stream crossings can be incredibly cold compared to lakes, just because of the running water aspect of that.
Oh, yeah. My feet would hurt.
And one of my more critical mistakes was jumping. It was a nice sunny day, and we knew there were going to be 3 more days of rain coming up. So we decided to take advantage of the nice sunny day and jump in the lake. And I was the only one with long hair. And like sure enough, 2 in the morning, I'm shivering away, and I've got one of my frozen hair strands poking me in the eye. That was like the most miserable night in this year I've ever spent. That actually probably should have stopped me from ever adventuring again. But just got to watch out, especially when you're nice and warm. You got to think ahead about is it going to be cold tonight? Is there going to be a storm tomorrow? Am I going to be doing an incline where I'm going to get hot when I first wake up, or am I going to be a decline where I'll be cold on the way down? So just some things to think ahead about when you're first entering into this year on your first through hike.
And one other thing, I don't know, kind of digressing here, but talking about gear, I was thinking about, you're required to have the bear canister to go into the Sierra. And it was just so, maybe Alpinist, you can speak to this too, or actually all of you could, but there is no possible way to carry 10 days worth of food in a bear canister. So it was like, you have your food in this can, and then we would have like a separate food bag strapped on. And you're like, what is the point? And it's like, I know we ran into a ranger at one point who basically just said, well, just do the best you can. And we're like, okay. And then, of course, we never saw any bears out there, but it's like, that's all you could do. It's like, we have the bear canister, but you also have this whole big bag of extra food because you need to eat to be able to get through those sections. And it was just, try to be safe with your food, I guess. But
I've sunk my food bag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've sunk my food bag before. Tied it to a couple of rocks, threw it about 4 feet deep in the water in a lake. It's a long story, but there was a bear scare, and so I wanted to protect my food. Um, and so that's what I ended up doing was just sinking my food bag. I didn't have a bear can. There are bear boxes between Kennedy Meadow South and Kennedy Meadow and Mammoth, but I don't recommend hikers, through hikers using them because when there's a bubble, those things get filled up, and then you are limited in choices where to camp because you're going to have to camp at one of those campgrounds where all the JMT hikers are.
And that's a year when the bear boxes are visible and you're not
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to
There
dig
were
like
no bear
20
boxes
feet
at
down.
23. Yeah, they're all covered in snow.
But I would say like if there's really a high snow year and you aren't able to use bear boxes or to if some resupply points are closed down, I remember VVR was closed, etc. And then I would guess there are not a lot of bears at that high altitude, maybe. So I think just be reasonable and do your best, but don't try to do anything ridiculous. It's still much safer, I would say, to take enough food to be sure that you're not running out, and then indeed maybe the first 1 or maybe 2 days are in a separate food bag outside of your bear can. But I don't think it's such an issue, really.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to reiterate that these guys are in 23, so their resupply options were way limited considering be because of the road closures and that
Yeah.
Future years not necessarily have to deal with the road closures as much as the
How,
23 guys did.
how did 2023 have to resupply between Mammoth and South Lake Tahoe? Were you able to go
Uh,
to Kenny Meadows North?
Kennedy Meadows North just opened, but it only opened when you started out at Mammoth. So we didn't really know it was gonna open. So we packed food all the way for South Lake Tahoe, so for 14 days.
That's wild.
Because VVR was closed. I don't think there are a lot of other options.
Yeah, luckily for us, at Sonora Pass, the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center is on the east side, down at the bottom. So we were able to get a hitch down there. I'm retired military, and I actually used to teach there. So we went to the commissary on base, and I was like with Casper and Crumbs, and I was like on my ID card, I'm like, yeah, this is my wife and my children because they're both in their 20s. And, so I got us all on base so we could do our resupply there.
They're like, this is a really smelly family.
Yeah. Luckily, the lady that runs the shop out there, she recognized me from years before, and that she's like, "Oh, you brought your family." I'm like, "Yeah." So we were able to resupply that way at the training center,
Nice.
and then got to hitch back up to the trail.
Nice.
Yeah, it was
we,
good.
we have a funny story with Kenny Meadows North because we left when we were in Mammoth Lakes. We were planning where to resupply because Kenny Meadows North, Sonora Pass at the time was closed. And I think we even contacted Outside J and just worked some things out. But I know when I got to Sonora Pass, the pass had just opened that very day, and so they gave me a ride. But
I should have waited for a few days with you.
Yeah, ugly stick. Tell them what you had to do.
It was rough, and it was closed when I got there, so I had to take the long road walk down. It was miserable with blisters and yeah. And when I was on Levitt's Peak, it was probably the scariest day on the trail for me because it happened to be like a 130-mile-an-hour windstorm that I did not know about. And it was measured like 120 at Lake Tahoe. So just imagine what it was up on Levitt Peaks. Like this
Oh,
windstorm actually picked me up off. I was levitating, and I actually thought that was the day that I was going to die. I'm like, I'm going to die here on Levitt Peaks here,
it's
and
funny
I'm
because
like,
two
do
days,
I want to go back down towards like Dorothy Pass, or do
yeah,
I want to
2 days.
crawl forward?
I think I got to Levitt's Peak in Sonora like maybe 2 days later, and it was just like calm for me. It was
Oh,
easy. Even the snow wasn't that bad. I just kind of went through it. Was like whatever. So very
it,
different
and
conditions.
that was just a matter of 2 days.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I should have stayed in Mammoth with wind and just because I think we had already taken 3 days. Didn't we take 3 zeros there? And I'm like, I can't
yeah.
take
So
5 days off. And I'm like, I'm just gonna
yes,
go slow. But something happened where you broke your
I mean, I
spike or
was
whatever.
you left the night before or the day before, and I had left that following morning, and I got all the way down to Reds Meadow, through Mammoth Pass, and the following day, I stepped in one of those post hole, tree well things, fallen submerged tree that I couldn't see, and I actually sprained my ankle on it. Like I've done it so many times where I post hold, but it never sprained my ankle. But in this bad instance, I sprained my ankle. And what's funny is just moments before that, I my spikes, my micro spikes, the rubber frame broke on them. So I was already committed to go back up to Mammoth anyway, just to replace the spikes because there's no way I could go through all that snow without spikes. And then moments later, I sprained my ankle, and then I also broke my trekking poles at the same time, or at least one of my trekking poles. So it was like this chain of bad things all happening within moments of each other, even though up to that point everything's been pretty fine. So I was like, then I had to kind of like limp with a sprained ankle all the way up Reds Meadow Road. I basically walked 10 miles all the way back to our motel and then stayed there a
Yes.
couple more days to heal and then finally went out.
That's another thing too. Like Res Meadows was closed, VVR was closed, like all of that was closed. We didn't get to experience any of that.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
yeah. And I'm looking back at everybody's posts, and I was like, I didn't get to see any of that. And it's like, yeah, I would like the Res Meadows and VVR, and I believe that one lady was missing there when we went through there, wasn't it? That girl, she was from like Georgia, and something. She was on a bike, and she went to VVR
Oh,
and broke
yes.
into.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was about
yeah.
that time.
Well, we
Yeah.
happened to walk right by that, and here she was in there just lost in the woods, and we just hiked right by.
It's funny because we were just outside of Thomas Edison
Thomas
Lake,
Edison, yeah.
right there, right before the climb up to Silver Pass. And what's funny is there was actually like a mountain biker out there doing some kind of camping. He was camping right next to the trail, which is really weird time because this was late, like early May, like May 1st or
Yeah.
something. So I don't know what it was, like a bike packer guy just camping right next to the trail. I don't know how he even got out there, but he had his mountain bike with him.
Yeah, definitely some strange sightings out there.
I believe my pictures and my videos on my YouTube channel is what got Sonora Pass open. They're like, no, it's like 4 or 5 more days out. And I was like, look, there's not even a rock on that road. There's not. So the owner of Kennedy Meadows North, he sent it to the newspapers, and within 2 days it was open.
Nice.
So I'm like, hey, Win, man, you're gonna get picked up, buddy. You don't have to make the long walk down.
I think a pianist, when he got to Sonora Pass, he had to use ice axes to get from the ice from the snow to the because it was like a good 12-foot drop.
Yeah, I think I actually camped on Sonora Pass because it was the only, so they just plowed, but not all the way through. Like the pass wasn't open yet, but they just plowed all the way to the top, and I think the other side they still had to do. So if you find some dry spot to camp, that's ideal. And I'm a bit too lazy to pitch my tent, so if you find some dry asphalt to just lay out your sleeping mat. And so I slept on Sonora Pass, and indeed, then the next morning I had to climb up again. And at Sonora it was quite all right, but Abbott's was open already, and that you didn't have like an entry spot, so you have to climb down the pass and then like towards the road and then cross the road and climb up again, because it's these two vertical walls of, I don't know, like 12 feet or something like that. And you have to dig the steps with your Isaacs indeed, and then basically do some improvised ice climbing. But that's fun.
I think we saw those because when we had gotten off in Bishop for that storm, that 5-day storm or whatever it was, so we went to Napa and drank wine and all that. On our way back, it's when I learned that Sonora Pass had opened, right? Because they plowed. They had just plowed it. So it was about that same time. So we actually grabbed some like canned margaritas, and because we had a rental car on our way back, so we actually drove up to the top of Sonora Pass, and I went off the road a little ways to a tree that I knew I could identify with some snow melt, and I buried those there. So we're giving ourselves gifts for our future selves. So then, like, so it was like 6 days later, we finally made it, or actually it's longer than that. Yeah. No, it was like 2 weeks later because we still had to go to Mammoth and everything else. But anyway, so we got to Sonora Pass, and I went down and found the tree, and there was so much snow melt, I was able to find the drink. So we were like, yeah, drinks, surprises for our future selves. But yeah, I remember when we drove up there, it was 12, 15 feet high on both sides. Yeah. That was wild.
So I'm gonna have to wrap it up in 9 minutes, and from my previous experience, it just cuts us off at 11:30. So if you have any things to say to 2026 hikers, now's a good time to do it. We still have plenty of time.
I'm curious, what's the out? Does anyone know what the outlook is for this year? I mean,
It's looking pretty dry. It's looking
yeah,
pretty
that's what I
dry.
thought. I live in NorCal, so it's been unseasonably warm like this time of
Yeah.
year, even though I'm kind of in the valley. But it does look, at least according to Post Solar, I'm looking at their charts, and it looks like it's average or maybe slightly, I don't know, it kind of shows Sierra being slightly above average, but not by much.
Yeah. From what I understand, total snowfall is slightly above average, but we're not but we've had no snow, zero snow since the earlier storms.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think even Jacinto doesn't have any snow at all, hasn't, or very little
Correct.
snow. So
I think so.
that would be a first for, like, well, not a first, but March starters or even April not having any snow in Jacinto would be interesting.
Amazing.
That's insane to think about that.
Yeah.
That really is.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, we tell all these crazy stories, and maybe it gets a bit daunting for the 2026 hikers. And I was going to say, like, it's all you gradually go into the Sierra. Like, you have these first experiences, and I was going to mention San Jacinto, like, but apparently if there is not a lot of snow this year, maybe that's not really a first experience. But normally you just have these first experiences where you see, okay, this is what hiking in snow and camping in snow is like. And so by the time you get to Kennedy Meadows, you more or less know what to expect, or you have some experience. And then I would just advise to take it step by step and day by day, and don't let yourself get scared by stories from other people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Don't let the it's like the
fear
mongering kind of take over. And it can be such an amazing experience if you just go in with a great attitude and just kind of know, like, it's going to be really hard, it's going to be a challenge, but you're going to grow so much, and you learn a lot, and you get really comfortable being uncomfortable, and it's a great experience.
You hate to stress it, but it's common sense. You have to use common sense. Safety, especially for the early starters that are going to go into the Sierra. Safety has to be number one. If you feel like Jay said, any butterflies or anything, back out. I witnessed right before Etna, Smith Lake, I believe it was. Then on all the comments on Far Out, because so many people that were right behind Win and I, they skipped north and they still had to deal with the snow. So there was comments, thank God for us, to follow along, and it said to either go down. I believe Win went down towards Smith Lake, and I went up on a ridge line. And then these three people without, and I'm not taking this away from the southern people, but the lady was from Texas and didn't have much snow experience or ice. And I was actually videoing on my channel about what to look for crevasses and what not to step on. And I look over to my left, and there's three people coming up the sideways traverse of ice, and the lady happened to lose her footing, and I witnessed her fall and hit those. Like her face was hanging, side of her skin was facing off. It was disgusting. And like I said, she was from Texas. If you don't feel comfortable, back out, go around, walk up to the ridge, go down the valley. There's ways around, or just wait for somebody that can cut a good boot track in and just follow along with them if you don't have any experience or if you're a little nervous. Because even if you have experience and you're a little scared and intimidated, that's when you can have a lot more mistakes is when you're
Yeah.
scared.
And a lot of, like we've kind of touched on before, a lot of the trickier technical snow areas are outside of the Sierra, like NorCal. Oregon has some. I'm sure in 2023 SoCal, but a lot of the time it's almost easier to go above where it's flatter or below the snow instead of trying to cross like a sideways traverse. Because a lot of the time you can just go down where it's flatter and then just go to the other side and then climb back up. So don't always follow the
And
red.
let me add, she had crampons on. She had the equipment. She just lost her footing.
Actually, I met
That's
her
what
at Trail Days.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to
But
mention her
so,
name, but it was bad. It was very bad. It took hours to cut boot tracks down to get to her after hitting those pine trees. And the sound of her pack and everything exploding out of it, like I'll never forget that. I was like, oh no, she's no longer with us. So I was surprised that she even survived.
yeah.
It
But
was
it,
scary. And we were literally like a mile and a half from Etna. A mile and a half. Like we're almost there to the trailhead and
yeah.
That's what I
But
was going to say is try to have some experience with your gear. So whether that be like I chose not to do crampons, though everybody in my group had crampons because I felt more comfortable in my spikes and I felt like that was more maneuverable for me, and that turned out just fine. When you get into patches of snow, smaller controlled patches of snow, try and use your ice axe and simulate self arrest. So just try and get familiar with your gear because like the example you just provided, crampons, the gear doesn't necessarily save you, but common sense and some experience with the gear will, lower those chances of bad
yeah,
events.
my thing
if
would
you
be
can
for
try and get experience with an ice axe. Like I've seen people using ice axes and they don't even have any clue how to use them. Like always have the ice axe on the high side, never on the low side. And I've seen so many people carrying an ice axe on the low side, and that just does nothing for you at all. It's just added weight.
yeah.
And
I would say don't be a purist when you're on the snow, right? Like you do not have to follow where the red line is supposed to be. Like Linda was just saying, find a safer route, right? Once you're on snow and the trail disappears, don't follow that red line. Follow the safest route to get to point B or whatever, right? Do not, you just don't be a purist. Like you're going to get yourself in trouble that way. Find the safest route that makes the most sense to get around or up or down that obstacle, right? That's,
Simultaneously, don't just blindly follow boot pack.
Yes.
yeah. And
No.
don't do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched the group
Yeah.
one day. We're just traversing. I knew to keep us at this elevation, and we'll end up all the way around the ridge where we need to be. And I was watching this boot track that was going down the ridge, and then I saw it come back up the ridge, and then finally we caught up to the group, and they had no idea where they're going, and they're doing this up and down, up and down. All they had to do was just stay on the same elevation and traverse around, right? And if we would have followed their boot pack, like they probably added 2 miles within a half mile. Just it was don't
Yeah,
so
I was
another quick
actually
example that doesn't have anything to do with snow is like when I went through Mission Creek. I guess they had flash flooding or whatever, and it was washed out. If you followed the red line, you weren't making it.
yeah.
You have to use common sense. Just use common sense. But look up and be like, that's not safe. I'm just going to stay down here. Just use common sense. And as we've seen this past year, people had to get rescued off of Mission Creek, and there was no snow at all. It's like, come on, people, please use common sense. Don't follow the red line if it looks dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, before I get cut off here, I just wanted to give each and every one of you a very heartfelt thank you. I can't wait for the 2026 hikers to come through. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing what the 26 hikers get from this discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks
Yeah.
for
Thank you,
organizing.
Jay.
Good luck,
Good luck,
2026.
everyone.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoy it.
Hey, Jay, where's this getting posted?
It'll be on the Uncensored group and the PCT class of 2026. I'll try to post it on both the class of 2026 groups. One of them I think I can post without asking for permission. The other one I post and then it takes a while for it to go up.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks, Ed.
you.
Yeah,
Have a great day.
absolutely. Looking
All right.
forward to next time. Cheers.
Cheers.